Hello, buddy. Welcome back to the Tin Man's Quarter channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor, and today I'm reading another chapter out of my North Carolina Ghosts and Legends book by Nancy Roberts. And this one takes place at Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and the story is called Dromgoole. Without further ado, let's get into the story, shall we? At the western edge of Chapel Hill is a high wooden cliff. The view from it is beautiful, and the spot is frequented by young lovers. Why does it seem to attract tragedy? In recent years, two young men have committed suicide nearby. Not far from the cliff lies a rock with mysterious stains which resemble blood. Is this rock the only remaining clue to the untimely death of an earlier university student? In 1833, a youth named Peter Dromgoole arrived from Virginia to study at the university. He had been there only a few months when he met and fell deeply in love with a beautiful Chapel Hill girl. There are few campuses which equal the loveliness of the University of North Carolina in the spring. It must have been particularly appreciated by young Peter Dromgoole that spring of 1833. He and Fanny, just like the name of the Bee Gees song, Fanny Be Tender with My Love. I just wanted to throw it in there, my bad. Had their own secret meeting place, a huge flat rock near the cliff. Some afternoons when Fanny arrived before Peter, she would sit on the rock watching the sunlight drift through the leaves above. It was never long, however, before she would see Peter's tall figure striding toward her along the winding road which led to the rock. One balmy spring day followed another so happily that these two could hardly have sensed the approaching tragedy. Then Peter noticed that another student, a close friend of his, was also interested in Fanny. Gradually, Peter's jealousy grew until finally it became an unreasoning thing which knew no bounds. He made every effort to avoid his former friend, but the other youth seemed to delight in goading him. One afternoon, the two met face to face on one of the narrow dirt walks of the campus. His rival's shoulder hit Peter's with such force as they passed that Peter's hat was knocked to the ground. The rage which had been smoldering within Peter rose, enveloped him. His face flushed and heated words flew between the two young men. The other youth challenged Peter to a duel. The challenge was no sooner flung down than it was accepted. Each chose his seconds. The spot agreed upon for the duel was to be near the cliff at the edge of the town. The hour was set for midnight, and plans were laid with the utmost secrecy. Peter was a reasonably good shot, but the night of the duel was such that marksmanship, good or bad, scarcely mattered. A warm May evening, it had rained briefly, and a low lying mist clung to the ground, wrapping itself tenaciously around students and trees alike. The two young men and their seconds made their way carefully toward the cliff. Before they realized it, the protagonists were almost upon each other. As they backed off for the agreed upon 10 paces, their figures assumed an almost ghost-like quality. Two shots rang out, and the seconds rushed toward the young man who lay on the ground. Blood covered the front of the ruffled white shirt. Even at his second attempt to lift his head, Peter Dromgoole gasped and breathed his last. Terrified, his rival and the two seconds dragged the lifeless Peter away from the cliff and toward a huge rock. Digging frantically, lifting their heads at each strange sound from the woods, they finally managed to dig a grave deep enough. They lifted Peter's body from the rock, placed it in its shallow grave, and replaced the earth as carefully as the darkness and their haste would allow. Meanwhile, Peter's family had received a strange letter from him, a letter which warned that he might bring sadness upon them, and that they would probably never hear from him again. This was the last they ever heard from their son. A few weeks later, his uncle, at the assistance of Peter's mother, made a trip to Chapel Hill. In the room which Peter had shared with a young man named John Williams were the only signs which remained of him: his trunk and a few clothes. Peter Dromgoole had disappeared as completely as if he had been spirited away. His fellow students were unable to give any clues as to what had happened to him. Stagecoaches leaving Chapel Hill show no record of any passenger named Peter Dromgoole. His uncle returned to Virginia a saddened and extremely worried man. His trip had been fruitless, and with not one clue to his nephew's whereabouts. Well, nobody's got to tell him what happened to him because they shot him in a duel over a girl and buried him right next to a rock on a cliff somewhere. And nobody's got to be telling him where he's at, because then it'll be almost like telling police where a crime had been committed. This version of Peter's death and disappearance was related by a former student as he lay on his deathbed some 60 years later. It may or may not be the true story of the strange fate of Peter Dromgoole, but what of a Chapel Hill girl named Fanny? For many a long summer afternoon, she waited at the rock for her lover. What strange brownish stains had suddenly appeared on it? Sometimes, as the shadows lengthened, she would think she saw a tall figure striding toward her. And here's a picture of Dromgoole Castle, as they named it, after that boy Peter. And they said the blood-stained rock lies in the shadows of it. And I feel sorry for his family because they're never going to know what happened to him. Through the woods, then she would put her head on her arms across the rock and sob quietly. Her agonizing questions were never to receive an answer. According to another story, young Peter ran away from school and enlisted in the army. However, the Munster rolls of his supposed battalion had never been found. Is the name of Peter Dromgoole upon them? If so, the yellow pages lying in some forgotten cache hold fast to their secret. The end. If a person said that they buried him right near a rock, you need to go check that rock out quick. Because I know by the time they dig it up, it'll be nothing but skeletal remains. But it seemed like Fanny was still in love with him, even though he thought that she was starting to like this other guy. But man, she'll never know what happened to him. It'll be just nothing but stories and rumors about him. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on post notifications for more book reading content like this. This has been another successful installment of the Tin Man's Quarter channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor, and that's a wrap, and have a nice day, y'all.